Hello everyone! Today's video is going to be a little bit on the shorter side. This week I did a lot of design work, website building, and organizing my work area. All that is great and very important, although it doesn't exactly make for the most interesting video. But I was able to make some progress on some projects, including lowering the rear suspension on the Firebird, and making some progress with the front suspension. I also made a little bit of progress on the interior for the 180SX, and I 3D printed this R34 Skyline and some parts for the Subaru chassis. In addition to that, I'm going to be announcing the winner of the 1/10 scale accessories giveaway. So I think it was about 3 weeks ago that I first installed the rear suspension onto the Firebird. And in that video I had mentioned that the chassis was going to need to be modified a bit in order to have the rear suspension sit at a much lower ride height. I started by removing the panhard bar so I could flip up the axle, I removed the shocks, and identified where the trailing arms were coming in contact with the chassis. I then began scoring the area with a hobby knife, and used some needle nose pliers and side cutters to remove the material. Up near the trailing arm mounts, I used a rotary tool with a small grinding bit to remove material in that area. I did the same thing on the opposite side. I didn't want to remove any more material than what I had to, so I flipped down the axle so I could see where it now sits. I ended up removing material all the way back to the base of the trailing arm mounts. In addition, I also needed to remove some material from around where the trailing arm connects to the axle, since this part was colliding with the chassis. With those modifications made, the rear axle can now sit as low as I want it to. I also wanted to see how it looks with the fender flare on. I think it looks pretty good around this height, maybe just a tad bit higher. I might end up sanding around the wheel arches a bit, and I'll definitely need to add a bit of spacing to the wheels. With enough material removed, I went around with a file to clean up and smooth any rough edges from where I cut. I also filed down the section near the differential housing to give it a bit more clearance. With all that looking good, I reinstalled the springs and the panhard bar. I cut down the springs a little bit, but not too much, since I wanted to wait until I have all the electronics and the interior installed before setting the ride height. With the rear suspension looking good, I went ahead and began working on the front suspension. I briefly talked in last week's video about the front suspension setup I'll be using. Just like the full-scale car, I'm going to be using a modified McPherson strut suspension. This setup is not the simplest design choice, but I'm hoping I can get it to work how I want it. Before installing the K-member, I cut off the motor mount pieces since I won't need them. The K-member piece that I designed fits in the exact same location as the piece that came in the model kit, so mounting will be very easy. I used some sandpaper to sand around where the K-member piece will be located to remove any glue that was left behind, and then I mounted the K-member piece with a little bit of super glue. I designed the K-member piece so that the motor I'm using can sit as low as possible. The angle from the shaft of the motor to the axle is not bad, but I do plan on installing some form of transmission for a little bit of gear reduction and to help make the drive shaft angle even better. Although this setup should look great, I don't think it will allow for a massive amount of steering angle, which will make drifting a lot more difficult. But so far so good. Getting the tolerances just right is a bit of a pain when working with parts this small. I'm noticing that the orientation the part is printed in sometimes has an effect on how well the fitment is, which adds another layer to the equation, but this left side setup feels really good. It's smooth and there's no play. I'm gonna hold off on mounting the strut to the body. That'll probably be one of the last things I do, since once the top of the strut is mounted to the body, I can no longer just easily remove the body like I can right now without having to disconnect the struts. The last sort of tricky thing to design will be the steering linkage. It's going to be small and it's probably going to be fragile, but I'm hoping I can make it just to scale as the suspension. I was able to do a little bit of work on the 180SX. I wanted to adjust the position and height of the body just a little bit. The custom base that I made allows for a little bit of adjustability for the body. I spent maybe 10 or 15 minutes fiddling around with the height by placing some washers underneath the base between the chassis piece. It was a little bit tricky to get the height correct on all four corners since the mounts glued to the body are not perfectly aligned and since the base is secured at 3 points instead of 4. I think it's maybe a little bit more level than what it was before, not really a huge difference, and I didn't really feel like spending any more time trying to get it positioned perfectly. I really like this mount design in that it allows for both the height and position of the body to be changed, but next time I think I'll make it a point to have it secured at 4 points to make positioning the body a little bit easier. I've also been working on some interior parts for this vehicle, including these racing seats. I really like how these seats turned out. The design is fairly generic, with the Recaro pole position NG being the main inspiration. I didn't want them to look too much like a racing seat you'd find on a purpose-built race car, something more like what you'd find on a modified street car. I also designed some door panel pieces. To keep the design simple, I decided to do an aluminum door panel like this one. I'm still working on the dash and center console, but they're getting close to completion. The exterior of the body is nearly finished. At some point I'll spray some transparent red, yellow, and white for the lights. Unfortunately, no light buckets were included with this body. However, I happen to have another ABC Hobby 180SX that's identical, although this one came in a bag instead of a box, and it does include light buckets for all the lights. I'm not exactly sure why they sell this body two different ways, but I'm glad I have these pieces. I'll probably be designing my own custom light buckets to use on the red 180, using these light buckets that came with the other body as a reference. For a while now, I've been experimenting with 3D printing RC car bodies. I wanted to experiment with making a 1/24th scale Nissan Skyline body on an FDM printer. This is the first time I've printed a car body in that scale, and overall I'm pretty impressed with how it came out. There is quite a bit of ghosting in spots due to the higher speed that I printed this at, just so it didn't take too long to print. I printed the body at a 0.1mm layer height using PLA plastic. The bumpers are printed using an SLA printer to give them a bit more detail. While the part was still attached to the support structure, I did some sanding to some of the larger surfaces, being careful not to sand away any details. Then I removed the support structure. The body is quite thin. It's only about 1mm thick, with the roof pillars being slightly thicker than the rest of the body. I'm surprised with the rigidity though. Although not quite as rigid as this Tamiya R32 Skyline, it's not far off. I'm thinking about mounting this body onto the 3D printed chassis I showed a few weeks ago. I did a little bit of further filing and sanding around all the edges. The body is definitely going to need a bit more work before it's ready for painting. One of the things I need to do is carve the panel lines deeper. In the future, I can accentuate small details and panel lines in the design of the vehicle so that they will show up more pronounced when printing in this scale. But like I said, I'm really pleased with how this turned out, and it definitely opens the door to more ambitious builds in the future. I think doing a scale build with a proper unibody construction would make for a cool project. In addition to printing the body, I also printed out some parts for the Subaru chassis. I'm really focusing on making everything as easy to print as possible, as well as improving the strength and movement. Using metal balls instead of the 3D printed plastic ones I was using before makes for a much better fit and smoother movement. Finally, I want to announce the winner of the 1/10 scale accessories giveaway, which is Gordy French. Congratulations, make sure you send me a message within 4 days of this video being uploaded and I will get these parts shipped out to you ASAP. For everyone else, I will be soon offering these items and more for sale. I'm focusing on selling a variety of different accessories, both resin cast and 3D printed, as well as offering a lot of lower cost options for those on a tight budget. Also, I have created a Facebook group over on the Make It RC Facebook page. It's just a casual place to showcase and discuss RC vehicles, custom builds, 3D printing, and RC related videos. I will be showcasing some of the content from this group in future videos, giving the creator a shout out and hopefully being able to promote their YouTube channel or Facebook page if they have one. As always, the link to the Make It RC Facebook page is in the description. That is all for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.